Sarah Martinez had dreamed of this day since she was 7 years old. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the bridal suite at the Grand Oak Manor, casting golden light across her ivory wedding dress hanging on the antique wardrobe. Today was supposed to be perfect. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail for over 18 months. The dress itself was a masterpiece. Sarah had saved for 2 years to afford the beautiful gown with its intricate lace sleeves and flowing train that seemed to dance when she walked. Her grandmother's pearl necklace rested gently around her neck, a family heirloom that had been worn by 3 generations of brides before her. The something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue tradition was complete with her new shoes, borrowed earrings from her sister, and the tiny blue ribbon sewn inside her dress. Michael Thompson, her fiancé of 3 years, was probably getting ready in his own suite across the hall. They had met during their final year of college when Sarah was studying to become a veterinarian, and Michael was finishing his degree in environmental science. Their love story had been like something from a romantic movie. They shared the same passion for helping animals and protecting nature. Michael had proposed to her last spring in the very place where they first met, under the old oak tree on their college campus. The wedding venue was perfect for their outdoor ceremony. Grand Oak Manor sat on 50 acres of rolling hills covered with wildflowers and ancient trees. The ceremony would take place in the Rose Garden, where hundreds of guests would witness their vows under a beautiful archway covered in white roses and baby's breath. The reception would follow in the elegant ballroom, where Sarah's mother had spent weeks choosing the perfect flowers, centerpieces, and lighting to create a magical atmosphere. As Sarah's maid of honor, her best friend Jessica helped her into the dress. Sarah couldn't help but think about all the people who would be there to celebrate with them. Her parents had flown in from California, and Michael's large Irish family had traveled from Boston. Her elderly grandfather, who had been fighting cancer for the past year, had insisted on walking her down the aisle since her father had passed away when she was 16. It meant the world to her that he felt strong enough to be there on her special day. The wedding party was small but close. Jessica had been Sarah's roommate in college and had introduced her to Michael at a campus environmental club meeting. The bridesmaids included Sarah's younger sister Emma and Michael's twin sister Michelle. The groomsmen were Michael's college roommates and his older brother David, who would serve as best man. Everyone had been so excited about this day, and Sarah felt overwhelmed with gratitude for all the love surrounding her. Outside, she could hear the sounds of final preparations. The florists were putting finishing touches on the ceremony decorations, and the catering staff was setting up tables for the cocktail hour. The string quartet had arrived early to practice, and their soft music drifted up to her window. Everything seemed to be falling into place exactly as she had imagined. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Michael saying he couldn't wait to see her, and that he loved her more than words could express. She smiled as she read it, feeling her heart flutter with excitement and nerves. In just 2 hours, she would become Mrs. Sarah Thompson. They had already bought a small house together near the animal clinic, where Sarah would start working as a junior veterinarian. Michael had been offered a position with the State Environmental Protection Agency, and their future seemed bright and full of possibilities. The makeup artist arrived to do final touches on Sarah's appearance. Her hair had been styled in an elegant updo with small white flowers woven throughout. Her makeup was natural and glowing, emphasizing her warm brown eyes and bright smile. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. Jessica helped her put on her shoes and gather her bouquet of white roses, eucalyptus, and baby's breath. The flowers smelled incredible and had been arranged by the same florist who had done her parents' wedding 28 years ago. Sarah's mother had insisted on this special touch, wanting to connect the generations of love in their family. As they prepared to head downstairs for the first look photos with Michael, Sarah took one last moment to look around the bridal suite. She wanted to remember every detail of this morning, from the way the sunlight hit her dress to the sound of laughter coming from the hallway where the bridesmaids were getting ready. This was the last morning she would wake up as Sarah Martinez, and tomorrow she would begin her new life as a married woman. The photographer knocked on the door, ready to capture the precious moments before the ceremony. Sarah's grandfather appeared in the doorway, looking handsome in his navy suit with a white rose boutonniere. His eyes filled with tears when he saw her, and he told her she looked just like her grandmother on their wedding day 60 years ago. The emotion in his voice made Sarah's eyes water, but Jessica quickly dabbed them dry to protect her makeup. Everything was perfect. The weather was ideal, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that would make the outdoor ceremony comfortable for all the guests. The flowers were gorgeous, the venue was stunning, and most importantly, she was about to marry the love of her life. Sarah felt like the luckiest woman in the world as she prepared to walk down the stairs and begin the most important day of her life. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock, and guests had been arriving since 3:30. Sarah watched from her upstairs window as cars filled the parking area, and people made their way toward the rose garden. She recognized many faces from different chapters of her and Michael's lives. Her college professors, childhood friends, family members she hadn't seen in years, and colleagues from the veterinary clinic where she had been working part-time during her final year of school. Michael's Irish family was easy to spot as they gathered near the ceremony site. His grandmother wore a beautiful emerald green dress and carried a small purse that had belonged to her own mother. The Thompson family was known for their loud laughter and warm hugs, and Sarah loved how they had welcomed her into their clan from the very beginning. Michael's cousins had flown in from Ireland specifically for the wedding, and their musical accents added to the joyful atmosphere. The string quartet began playing soft classical music as guests found their seats. White chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing the rose-covered archway where Sarah and Michael would exchange vows. Tall arrangements of white flowers marked the aisle, and delicate petals had been scattered along the white runner that stretched from the garden entrance to the altar. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the oak trees, creating a magical dappled effect across the entire scene. Sarah's nerves began to build as the time approached. Jessica noticed her hands shaking slightly as she held her bouquet and offered words of encouragement. The bridesmaids looked beautiful in their soft lavender dresses, each carrying smaller bouquets that complemented Sarah's larger arrangement. Emma, Sarah's sister, kept making jokes to help lighten the mood, while Michelle shared stories about Michael's excitement over the past few days. The photographer was capturing every moment, from the candid shots of Sarah getting ready to the formal portraits with the bridal party. When it came time for the first look, Sarah's heart pounded as she walked down the grand staircase to meet Michael in the manor's formal garden. The photographer had positioned Michael with his back turned, and Sarah approached quietly from behind. When Michael turned around and saw Sarah in her wedding dress for the first time, his face lit up with pure joy and amazement. He whispered that she looked absolutely beautiful, and they shared a quiet moment together before the chaos of the ceremony began. These private minutes felt precious to both of them. A calm before the celebration that would follow. The ceremony coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, had been organizing weddings at Grand Oak Manor for over 20 years. She moved efficiently between the bridal party, the musicians, and the catering staff, ensuring every detail was perfectly timed. Sarah felt confident knowing such an experienced professional was handling the logistics while she focused on enjoying her special day. As 4 o'clock approached, the guests settled into their seats. Sarah's grandfather appeared at her side, offering his arm for the walk down the aisle. Despite his recent health struggles, he stood tall and proud, honored to fulfill this important role. Sarah's mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue as she watched from the front row, remembering her own wedding day and feeling overwhelmed with happiness for her daughter. The processional music began, and the bridesmaids started their slow walk down the aisle. Jessica went first, followed by Emma and Michelle, each taking careful steps and smiling at the gathered family and friends. The groomsmen were already positioned at the altar with Michael, who looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit with a white rose boutonniere that matched Sarah's bouquet. When the traditional wedding march began, all the guests rose to their feet and turned toward the garden entrance. Sarah appeared on her grandfather's arm, and a collective sigh of admiration rippled through the crowd. Her dress caught the afternoon light beautifully, and her radiant smile showed her pure happiness. She moved gracefully down the aisle, making eye contact with loved ones and feeling surrounded by their support and love. Michael watched her approach with tears in his eyes, amazed that this incredible woman had chosen to spend her life with him. The officiant, Pastor Williams, had known both families for years and had helped Sarah and Michael write personal vows that reflected their deep connection and shared values. He smiled warmly as Sarah and her grandfather reached the altar. The ceremony began with traditional words about marriage being a sacred bond between two people who choose to face life's joys and challenges together. Pastor Williams spoke about the importance of love, respect, and commitment in building a strong marriage. Family members and friends listened intently, many thinking about their own relationships and the meaning of the promises being made. When it came time for the exchange of rings, Michael's hands trembled slightly as he slipped the white gold band onto Sarah's finger. The ring had been his grandmother's engagement ring, reset with a new diamond that sparkled brilliantly in the afternoon sun. Sarah's ring for Michael was engraved with their wedding date and a short phrase in Gaelic that meant "My heart belongs to you," a tribute to his Irish heritage. The vows they had written individually brought tears to many eyes. Sarah promised to support Michael's dreams, to care for him in sickness and health, and to love him more deeply with each passing year. Michael vowed to be her partner in all adventures, to make her laugh when she was sad, and to build a home filled with love, laughter, and probably many rescued animals, which made everyone chuckle since they knew about Sarah's soft spot for strays. As Pastor Williams prepared to pronounce them husband and wife, everything seemed perfect. The sun was beginning to set behind the oak trees, casting a golden glow over the entire scene. The guests waited in anticipation for the final words that would officially unite Sarah and Michael as a married couple. Sarah felt like she was living in a beautiful dream that was about to come true. Just as Pastor Williams opened his mouth to speak the final words, a commotion erupted from the back of the ceremony area. Guests turned in their seats to see what was happening, and Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as she noticed the disturbance. A medium-sized golden retriever had somehow gotten into the garden and was running between the rows of chairs. Clearly agitated and searching for something or someone, the dog appeared to be injured, with what looked like blood on its golden fur and a slight limp as it moved. Wedding coordinator Mrs. Patterson immediately tried to quietly remove the animal, but the dog seemed determined to reach the front of the ceremony. Several guests attempted to help catch the dog, but it skillfully avoided their gentle efforts while continuing its urgent mission toward the altar. Sarah, being a veterinary student, immediately recognized that the dog was in distress and possibly hurt. Her instincts kicked in, and despite being in the middle of her wedding ceremony, she couldn't ignore an animal that clearly needed help. The dog's behavior suggested it wasn't just lost or confused, but was actually trying to communicate something important. Michael noticed his bride's concern and squeezed her hand reassuringly. He knew Sarah well enough to understand that she would never be able to continue the ceremony, knowing an injured animal needed attention. It was one of the qualities he loved most about her, her compassionate heart that extended to all living creatures. The golden retriever finally reached the front area where the wedding party stood. Instead of stopping, the dog went directly to Sarah, sat down at her feet, and looked up at her with pleading brown eyes. In its mouth, the dog carried something that was partially hidden, but Sarah could see it was some kind of fabric or clothing item. Pastor Williams paused the ceremony, unsure how to handle this unexpected situation. The guests murmured among themselves, some amused by the interruption while others worried about the delay. Sarah's grandfather, still standing beside her, smiled gently and whispered that maybe this was meant to happen for a reason. Sarah carefully knelt down in her wedding dress, not caring about the expensive fabric touching the ground. She spoke softly to the dog, using the gentle voice she had learned to use with frightened animals during her veterinary training. The dog seemed to understand that she wanted to help and carefully dropped what it had been carrying at her feet. What the dog had brought was a small yellow rain jacket, the kind worn by young children. The jacket was muddy and torn, and Sarah's heart sank as she realized this dog had been trying to lead someone to a child who might be in trouble. The golden retriever looked back toward the woods beyond the garden, then back at Sarah, clearly trying to communicate that someone needed help urgently. Without hesitation, Sarah stood up and announced to the gathered crowd that there might be a child in danger in the woods. Her voice carried clearly across the silent garden as she explained that the dog's behavior in the child's jacket suggested someone was lost or hurt nearby. The guests immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. Michael stepped forward and took charge, asking several of the men in the wedding party to organize a search. David, his best man, was an experienced hiker and outdoorsman who quickly began coordinating the effort. Michael's cousins from Ireland, who worked in emergency services back home, offered their expertise in search and rescue operations. Sarah's grandfather, despite his age and recent health issues, insisted on helping coordinate the search from the ceremony site. He had been a volunteer firefighter for 30 years before retiring and understood the importance of acting quickly when a child was missing. Mrs. Patterson immediately called the local police and emergency services. While the wedding guests transformed from celebration mode into rescue mode, the golden retriever seemed to understand that help was coming and began leading the search party toward the woods. Sarah wanted to go with them, but her wedding dress and shoes made it impossible to navigate the rough terrain safely. Instead, she stayed near the ceremony site with several other guests, including some who had medical training, ready to help if an injured child was found. Jessica and the other bridesmaids gathered around Sarah, offering support and comfort during this frightening situation. Emma held her sister's hand while Michelle kept watch for any signs of the search party returning. The string quartet had stopped playing, and the only sounds were the voices of the searchers calling out and the distant sound of approaching sirens as emergency responders headed to the scene. Sarah's mother approached her daughter with tears in her eyes, proud of how Sarah had immediately put the safety of an unknown child before her own wedding ceremony. This was the woman she had raised, someone who would always choose to help others even when it meant sacrificing something important to herself. Michael's parents expressed similar sentiments. Knowing their son had chosen a remarkable partner, the guests remained calm and supportive, understanding that this interruption was far more important than any wedding ceremony. Many of them were parents themselves and could imagine the terror of having a missing child. Several people offered to help in any way possible, from providing water and snacks for the searchers to using their cell phones to contact additional emergency services. As 20 minutes passed, Sarah began to worry about both the missing child and the brave dog who had tried so hard to get help. The golden retriever had disappeared into the woods with the search party, and she hoped the animal wasn't too injured to continue helping guide them to whoever needed rescue. Pastor Williams remained nearby, ready to continue the ceremony whenever Sarah and Michael felt it was appropriate. He had officiated hundreds of weddings over his career, but he had never experienced anything like this situation. He admired the young couple's immediate response to help someone in need, and knew this experience would become an important part of their marriage story. The sun continued to set behind the oak trees, and the golden hour lighting that would have made perfect wedding photos was slowly fading. But Sarah knew that no photograph could capture the importance of what was happening. Somewhere in those woods, a child needed help, and her wedding day had become something much more meaningful than just a celebration. After what felt like an eternity but was actually only 35 minutes, shouts of relief echoed from the woods. The search party had found what they were looking for, and the voices carried a tone of urgency mixed with hope. Sarah's heart pounded as she strained to see any sign of the returning group through the trees that bordered the garden. David appeared first, carrying a small figure in his arms. Behind him came Michael and several other searchers, along with the golden retriever who was limping but keeping pace with the group. As they got closer, everyone could see that David was carrying a little girl, probably around 5 years old, who appeared to be unconscious but breathing. The child had blonde hair and pigtails and was wearing a pink dress that was now dirty and torn from her ordeal in the woods. Her small face was pale, and she had several scratches on her arms and legs from branches and thorns. The searchers had found her about half a mile into the woods, unconscious near a small creek where she had apparently fallen and hit her head on a rock. Sarah immediately went into veterinary mode, drawing on her medical training to assess the situation. While she wasn't qualified to treat humans, her knowledge of anatomy and emergency care proved helpful as the paramedics arrived and took over the child's care. The little girl was breathing steadily and her pulse was strong, which were encouraging signs. The golden retriever collapsed near the ceremony site, finally allowing its own injuries to show. Sarah knelt beside the brave dog and carefully examined its wounds. The dog had several deep cuts on its paws from running through the rough terrain, and a gash on its side that had been bleeding. Despite its own pain and exhaustion, the dog had never stopped trying to get help for the child. Dr. Martinez, Sarah's mentor from the veterinary clinic, happened to be among the wedding guests and quickly came forward to help treat the dog's injuries. Together, He and Sarah cleaned and bandaged the wounds while speaking softly to calm the frightened animal. The dog seemed to understand that it had accomplished its mission and finally allowed itself to rest. As the paramedics worked on the little girl, she began to regain consciousness. Her first word was a weak call for Buddy, and everyone realized she was looking for the golden retriever who had saved her life. The dog's ears perked up at hearing its name, and despite its injuries, it crawled closer to the stretcher where the child lay. The little girl's eyes opened fully when she saw her faithful companion, and she reached out a small hand to touch the dog's head. Tears flowed down the faces of many wedding guests as they witnessed the reunion between the brave dog and the child he had risked everything to save. It was clear that Buddy and this little girl shared a special bond. Through careful questioning by the paramedics and police officers who had arrived, they learned that the child's name was Emma Rose Patterson, and she was the 5-year-old granddaughter of Mrs. Patterson, the wedding coordinator. Emma had been visiting her grandmother for the weekend and had been playing in the gardens earlier that day while Mrs. Patterson was busy with wedding preparations. Mrs. Patterson was overcome with emotion when she realized that her own granddaughter had been the missing child. She had been so focused on managing the wedding that she hadn't noticed Emma had wandered off into the woods with Buddy, the family's beloved golden retriever. Buddy had been Emma's constant companion since she was a baby, and the dog's protective instincts had kicked in when the child fell and was injured. The paramedics determined that Emma had a mild concussion and several cuts and bruises, but no serious injuries. She would need to go to the hospital for observation and proper treatment of her head injury, but the prognosis was very good. Mrs. Patterson rode in the ambulance with her granddaughter, grateful beyond words that the child had been found safe. Before leaving for the hospital, Emma asked about Buddy and whether he would be okay. Sarah assured the little girl that the dog would receive excellent care and would recover fully from his injuries. Dr. Martinez had already made arrangements to take Buddy to the emergency veterinary clinic for proper treatment and monitoring as the ambulance and emergency vehicles departed. An unusual quiet settled over the wedding venue. The sun had almost completely set, and the golden hour had passed into the soft purple twilight of early evening. The string quartet remained ready to play, and Pastor William stood patiently waiting to see what the bride and groom wanted to do next. Sarah looked around at all the faces of their family and friends, people who had traveled from far and wide to celebrate their wedding day. Instead of being disappointed or frustrated by the delay and drama, every single person was smiling with joy and pride. They had all witnessed something remarkable, a reminder that love comes in many forms and that true character is revealed in moments of crisis. Michael took Sarah's hands and looked into her eyes with more love and admiration than ever before. He told her that watching her immediately prioritize helping that child and dog had shown him once again why he wanted to spend his life with her. Her compassionate heart and quick action had helped save 2 lives today, and he couldn't be prouder to call her his wife. Sarah felt overwhelmed with emotion as she looked at her future husband and realized that this unexpected event had actually made their wedding day more meaningful than any perfectly planned ceremony could have been. They had started their marriage by working together to help others, which felt like the perfect foundation for their life together. The guests began to gather around the couple, and Sarah's grandfather stepped forward with tears in his eyes. He said that in all his years he had never seen anything more beautiful than watching his granddaughter put the needs of others before her own happiness. He was certain that her grandmother, who had passed away years earlier, was looking down with tremendous pride. Pastor Williams approached the couple and asked if they were ready to continue with the ceremony. The sun had set completely now, but the garden was beautifully lit with string lights and lanterns that Mrs. Patterson's assistant had turned on during the emergency. The romantic glow created an even more magical atmosphere than the original daytime ceremony would have provided. Without hesitation, Sarah and Michael both nodded yes to Pastor Williams. They wanted to complete their wedding ceremony right there, surrounded by the people who had just witnessed them at their very best. The evening air was warm and comfortable, and the twinkling lights created an even more romantic atmosphere than they could have planned. The guests quickly returned to their seats, their hearts full of emotion from the dramatic events they had just experienced together. There was a special energy in the air now, a sense that this couple and this community had been through something extraordinary together. The string quartet began playing again, and Pastor Williams resumed his place at the flower-covered archway. As Pastor Williams continued with the ceremony, his words took on deeper meaning after what had just happened. When he spoke about marriage being a partnership where two people support each other through all of life's unexpected moments, everyone understood exactly what he meant. Sarah and Michael had just proven they could work together under pressure and make difficult decisions as a team. When Pastor Williams reached the part about promising to care for each other in sickness and health, in good times and bad times, Sarah and Michael exchanged knowing looks. They had already faced their first unexpected challenge as a couple, and they had handled it with grace, compassion, and unity. Their love had been tested and proven strong in just one afternoon. The exchange of rings carried extra significance now. As Michael slipped the wedding band onto Sarah's finger, he whispered that he promised to always support her caring heart and her instinct to help others. When Sarah placed the ring on Michael's finger, she whispered that she promised to face any adventure life brought them, knowing they could handle anything together. Pastor Williams then invited the couple to share their personal vows, which they had written weeks earlier but which now seemed prophetic. Sarah's vow to support Michael's dreams and be his partner in all adventures felt especially meaningful after they had just navigated their first real adventure together. Michael's promise to make Sarah laugh and to build a home filled with love and rescued animals brought smiles to everyone's faces, especially after they had all witnessed their instant connection with Buddy and little Emma. When Pastor Williams finally pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the crowd was louder and more heartfelt than any ordinary wedding celebration. These guests had seen this couple prove their commitment to each other and to their values in the most dramatic way possible. As Michael and Sarah shared their first kiss as a married couple, many people in the audience were wiping away tears of joy. The photographer, who had captured every moment of the dramatic afternoon, took beautiful pictures of the kiss under the twinkling lights. The evening setting provided a completely different but equally stunning backdrop from what had been originally planned. The photos would tell an incredible story of a wedding day that became about so much more than just two people getting married. As the newly married couple walked back down the aisle together, the Golden Retriever's heroic journey had inspired everyone present. The guests threw flower petals instead of rice, creating a beautiful shower of color in the evening light. Sarah and Michael stopped to wave at friends and family, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for all the love and support surrounding them. The reception moved forward as planned, but with an added layer of meaning and celebration. The catering staff had kept everything perfectly prepared despite the delay, and the ballroom looked magical with its carefully chosen decorations and lighting. The first dance was even more emotional than usual, as Sarah and Michael held each other close and reflected on the incredible day they had shared. During the toasts, David, the best man, spoke about how he had always known Michael had chosen an amazing partner, but watching Sarah's immediate response to help a child in need had shown everyone what true character looked like. Jessica, the maid of honor, tearfully shared how proud she was to call Sarah her best friend, and how this day had proven that she and Michael were perfect for each other. Sarah's grandfather surprised everyone by asking to make an impromptu toast. Despite his recent health struggles, he stood strong and spoke about how his granddaughter had honored their family's values of putting others first. He said that her grandmother would have been so proud to see Sarah choose compassion over convenience. On her wedding day, the most touching moment came when Mrs. Patterson called from the hospital with an update on Emma. The little girl was doing well and would make a complete recovery. Emma had asked her grandmother to tell the pretty bride thank you for helping save Buddy, and she wanted to know if she could visit the dog while he recovered. Sarah immediately said yes and asked Mrs. Patterson to tell Emma that she and Michael would love to have her visit once she felt better. The evening continued with dancing, laughter, and celebration, but everyone felt that they had been part of something truly special. The wedding guests would remember this day not just as a beautiful ceremony, but as the day they witnessed real love in action. Sarah and Michael's marriage had begun with an act of service and sacrifice, setting the foundation for a lifetime of putting others first and supporting each other through anything life might bring. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Sarah and Michael stood together looking out at the gardens where their dramatic afternoon had unfolded. They knew they would never forget this day, not because everything went according to plan, but because nothing had gone according to plan and they had discovered something beautiful about themselves and their relationship in the process. 3 weeks later, Sarah and Michael received a photo in the mail from Mrs. Patterson. It showed Emma Rose, fully recovered and smiling brightly, hugging Buddy, who was wearing a small bow tie. The note attached said that Emma had insisted the dog needed to dress up because he was a hero. Sarah and Michael framed the photo and placed it on their mantel, a perfect reminder of the day their marriage began with an act of love that extended far beyond themselves. Their wedding day had become legendary among their families and friends. A story that would be told for generations about the bride who fell to the ground in her wedding dress to help an injured dog, and how that simple act of compassion had saved a little girl's life and brought a community together in the most beautiful way possible.